couple of problems with this. The first is that a whole bunch of shorebirds don't have that one there. Some of them have a little bitty piece hanging down there, and some have completely lost that. So on the shorebirds, it'll be 1, 2, 3 toes forward. But also, this foot is drawn as if you are looking down on it. This bird here is drawn as if you're looking at it from the side. So if you're up close to a bird and you're looking down here, you're going to see all these toes, right? Or in the case of this one, it's got its toes sort of flopped around a rock so that it's pointing towards you, right? But if you're looking at the side view of a bird, and you can see its foot, and it's not something that's super close to you, what you're going to be seeing is its foot coming out like this. You'll be seeing the side view of all those toes. So don't think, here's the universal symbol for bird foot. Right? So even if you get that part right, this is a foot that is drawn from the top. This is a bird that is drawn from the side. If you're drawing a top view of the bird, yes, then you would see that. Yes, Pax.
Bird was on like a glass surface, and then you were inside the glass box. Bird was standing on top, and you would get onto the bird's feet. But then you can see the whole body there, so it looks like an alien bird.
Yeah, like you're sort of seeing this as like you're visualizing this from a from below view.
Yeah.
Kind of a cubist version.
Yeah, the cubist bird. Cubist bird. I like that. Good call, Pax. Let's think briefly about balancing our birds. So the mass of this bird's weight has to center over its feet, both from the side and from the front. Take a look at me. Both of my feet are on the ground, right? My body weight is centered right here. I'm going to lift this foot up. Look at what I have to do if I don't want to come crashing this way. I'm going to lift this foot up. Right. I took my center of balance and I put it directly over that foot that's on the ground. So if I have see if I can get a here is my bird. This is the sort of center of gravity of it. Standing on one foot, this bird needs to have its foot connected with the ground somewhere along this line, or it'll fall over. So that means if it's a duck, it could have its foot coming down like this. If it is a black-necked stilt, it could have its leg coming down like that. But that foot has to hit that line. Otherwise, the bird will fall forward or back. I can also have, if I've got 2 feet out, I can have them straddling my center of gravity. But if I have just one foot on the ground, my center of gravity has to be over that foot. So when I am looking at a bird, all its weight has to come down to that point there. If that's not directly under the center of gravity of that bird, the bird's going to go toppling over. And then it's that. It looks like it should topple over to me.
Well, maybe mid-stride. I mean, is it just standing there?
My guess is that this, with this foot position here, this one is tucked up in there.
Almost looks like he's to the left. Not right underneath it.
Now, one possibility is that we don't know what was the ground surface when the picture was taken? Might have been.
Could they use their bill for balance?
I would imagine, but only when I sort of see them moving their heads around, I don't see a big shift in that position. We're going to take briefly a look at some of the body feathers. First of all, don't be frightened by this diagram here. You don't have to memorize all the feathers and how they overlap. Right? This is what they're doing, but this is not what you're going to see. If you draw on every feather, your bird will look like a pine cone. Right? But this is up here because I want to point out a few basic clumps of feathers. Right? There's going to be a big clump of feathers on the back of the bird that starts smaller and gets bigger. Those are called the scapular feathers, and they cover up the bird's shoulder blade or its scapula. There is a clump of feathers on the side of the wing that starts smaller and gets bigger towards the back. These get bigger as they go down, these ones get bigger as they go back. Also, these ones get bigger as they go down and down, right? These ones here are called covert feathers. There's also a little group of feathers out behind this whole scapular covert zone here, sticking out here, which often have very kind of crisp, clear edges on them. Those are called tertial feathers. And here's my little wingtip sticking out. On a bird, now here it is with this whole wing exposed. Look at these cool black and white patterns on this wing. This bird folds up its wings. You're thinking, I'm going to see these big, bold black and white patterns on the side of the wing of this bird. But all these things tuck up underneath these little gray feathers here, and you get something like that. So what are we picking out here? See this little kind of crease right there? That's a place where we go from big feathers, small, getting bigger, to then small, getting bigger down here. Right? So this is the break between the scapular feathers and these covert feathers on the side of the body. Sticking out behind, so here's this sort of clump of those feathers. Sticking out behind them are these tertial feathers. You can see 1, 2, 3 very kind of clearly edged tertial feathers. This little black thing sticking out behind them are the tips of these feathers. This whole crazy pattern is completely hidden from your view. If you draw in every feather in here, you get this pine cone effect. It's not what you're really seeing. Sometimes birds with really fresh feathers, you can see a lot of sort of scalloping and patterning on them. From a distance, though, you're not going to be getting that really clearly. So don't drive yourself nuts thinking you have to memorize these. But look at these. What color are the scapulars on this bird? Yeah, so there's the big orange patch up here. There are those scapulars. Then you can see them getting bigger, and all of a sudden they stop. Here are those covert feathers, smaller, getting bigger. And sticking out behind those are these tertial feathers sticking out there. You see how that's the same basic patterns of clumps of feathers we're seeing across all these different groups, all these different birds. So there is a real sort of similarity in what you're going to be seeing.
This is true for all birds or just for the shorebirds?
So this is in different types of birds. These groups of feathers are different sizes. These are the general proportions. So these feathers occur in all these birds, but how big they are, for instance, shorebirds and ducks have really big scapulars, and tertials are really clear on them. And they'll make a slightly different pattern, say, when you're looking at songbirds. But let's take a look at a bird that, so I'm not drawing in feather, 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 even though I know all the feathers are there. I can see a slight little kind of edge of a ridge there, right? And I start looking at this. Can you make sense of this in terms of scapulars, covert feathers, and tertials? The scapulars and covert feathers often make their own kind of clump together. The tertials then stick out behind those. What are these? And I've got this zone coming through here. Those are my tertials there.
It almost looks like a toupee at the top.
A toupee.
Sitting on top, the scapulars. I mean,
Oh, yes.
It looks like it's sort of not, you know, I guess because the wing is tucked up under it, sort of pushes it up or something.
Well, and also we're going from small feathers to big feathers, then back to small feathers again. Right there. So there's this big jump right here in feather size. And so it doesn't look like these really go with those. Like it's doing some sort of crazy comb over. These big feathers actually are doing a comb over. These scapular feathers are all attached up in here. And then they just, poof, they flop out like a toupee. So we've looked at an approach to getting the basic structure of the bird, the posture, the proportions, the angles. We've looked at a few step-by-steps of how these could go together, kind of giving you a flow of drawing a bird. We have looked at some detail areas of beaks, of the feathers on the body, and the legs and the feet. The last thing which we want to take a look at is what are really realistic expectations for doing a field sketch? Right? What does that look like in the field? So
What is that bird?
this is a little plover. Plovers have these great little sort of rings across their faces, throats, and chests. Different species of plovers. You can get different numbers of rings, complete rings, incomplete rings, and some different patterns on the face, whether they're all dusty brownish or whether they pop out as black.
Do you know which one that is?
Oh boy. Does anybody know? I guess.
There's a killdeer too.
Yeah, killdeer is a kind of plover with two gold bars there. That'd be my guess. On a lot of these, I just sort of go around the internet and kind of go, there's a cool picture. I could use that educationally. Stick it in there. So I'm it looks to me like a semi-palmated plover, but it could have also been like something from Europe that I pulled out and stuck in there. That kind of has the same general patterns and body conformation. So, what does it look like in the field? So here's some. Oh, you guys weren't supposed to be there. This was supposed to be back when I was talking about. Look at these feet from the side view. Right? See how it's just like the letter L. Just wondering where that slide went. Now, field sketching. Here's an example. This is how field sketches look. Yeah. Yeah, in my dreams, right? These are not field sketches. How are these drawings done? These drawings are done by having my field sketches out on my table in front of me, along with dead birds and a bunch of photographs, and I'm taking all these different resources, putting them all together, and making these sort of field-guidey drawings, right? That's how, so this is not your expectation for field sketches, right?
It's
Don't-
beautiful.
It's lovely, but birds don't really look like this. Like these have these you can't really see the shadows that are on these things. They're sort of in this neutral light, but it's kind of useful for identification purposes. And you can kind of get into like all these sort of lovely barring and patterns that these critters have, but not a field sketch. All right. So these are field sketches. Right. Look at all the detail in this one. Right? Here, check out that bird. Alright? Is it a bird or an apple? You make the call. But, in context here, it stands in as a bird. It even has a reflection. Right? So if what I see is just a shape, I just draw that shape. You don't have to draw anything you can't see. You can't see the feet, don't draw the feet. You can't see the details of the plumage, don't draw the plumage. If you're seeing just a basic shape, draw that basic shape. Sort of how much detail I put in really is within the constraints of what is the critter showing me? Is this a dead bird that I can put right here in my lap and draw all its details? Right? Do I have a really powerful telescope and it's asleep? Right? Or is this running around out there on the salt marsh and I am kind of getting some postures and poses and maybe a few kind of ideas of where is it dark and where is it light? Standing there by the side of the marsh looking out, there's a whole bunch of birds kind of running around. One thing you can look at is what are the spacing between all these birds? How far apart are they? Where do they kind of put themselves on the beach? Things like the Lisa Sandpiper like to be right there at the water's edge, right? Others are going to be resting further back. Different sorts of critters seem to sort themselves out in different ways. Who's the boss of the beach? Who's kind of taking the prime roosting spot? So you can do a lot, even with, here's just a bunch of circles representing kind of distribution of birds, and in a few kind of lines, and this is information in a journal. Or it's a basic template for kind of working these same drawings out more and kind of working them into a drawing. It'd be perfectly fine to stop here, or working it further into a pencil sketch. Notice that in these drawings, there's no detail. Maybe a basic sense of dark and light. What tools you use for field journaling is just totally a matter of personal preference. And I just recommend people use what you feel comfortable with. You don't need to, like, if I were a real journaler, because that person is doing watercolor, I should be doing that. No. Use whatever really works for you. If you like graphite pencil, do everything in graphite pencil. If at some point you want to play with colored pencils, bring those into your repertoire. And there's a bunch of people in the Nature Journal Club. You can look at how are they playing with those colored pencils. Other people are doing watercolor. So I'm going to take this one and turn it into a watercolor painting. And sort of show you sort of in a few basic steps, kind of a way of applying watercolor without getting too fussy. Generally in watercolor, you start lighter and then you work darker. Because you can always make things darker. So I started just by putting in, here's my water. Once again, it's water that's not blue. And then I mixed up sort of a grayish purple mixture and put that all over my mud flats and birds. Then, what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to mix up a little bit of darker paint and bring that in on some of my birds here to make them pop out. Whoa. Let's try that again. So that's what that button does. All right, here we go. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so this is just one coat of purple, purpley gray. Now, I'm going to punch that in a little bit more. My new favorite bird is this guy. It does stand in for a bird. Then I can look in here and sort of pick out which of, can I, just to put a little bit more contrast into these birds, I can now go even darker, putting some dark onto the backs of those birds. There's no detail in this. From this distance, I can't really see detail. Maybe a little bit on some of the ones that are the closest to me. But some people think that a drawing is finished when you take the same amount of detail and you put that throughout the entire painting. Detail is just a little spice that you can add at the end of a drawing, a little bit of it into those elements that are the closest to you, and that will really pull them into the foreground and kind of, and then people look at it and they think that the whole drawing is detailed, but it's not. There's a little bit of detail, a little bit of borrowing on some of these ones up close, and you're done. So, the amount of information, the amount of detail to put in, it really depends on how cooperative the birds are. But what makes this work is actually just the shapes of these birds. That's posture, proportions, and angles. Were you stretching or had a question?
I was touching.
So these basic drawing principles can be applied to drawing and sketching anything that you see. We've taken a look at a few specifics that are particular to shorebirds, but you'll find that these same principles are going to show up again and again and again as we're working on workshops on drawing all sorts of different topics. Lastly, when you get out there, these beasties are going to be wandering around. They are not going to pose for you, although sometimes they kind of get curious about you, and something attracts their attention, and for one reason or another, they might hold still. And when they do, they will be, you'll say, "Thank you, bird," and you'll sort of start working on that drawing more. And the drawings, what I usually do is have a bunch of different drawings, all kind of going together on the same page. And as the bird goes through different postures, I'll jump from one drawing to another, to another, to another, to another. The drawing that I get the furthest along on will be the most characteristic posture of that bird. You don't have to finish any of them. You can also pick part of it. Like, what are the patterns that I see on its head? What is the shape of its bill? And then as it starts moving around again, you can make a series of drawings, kind of, you know, one moving right, one moving left, one with its head down feeding. And you jump into that drawing when you get a little bit of a moment of information from it. Sometimes when you're looking at somebody cruising around like this, its constant motion can baffle you. How do you kind of get any kind of handle on a place to start? You know, if you were to pause it, okay, then we can do something. But one way around that is just kind of look at this and ask you just close your eyes for a second, and then open your eyes for a moment like the shutter of a camera and close them again. And you'll get a little moment sort of popped into your eyes, and then you put down a little quick sketch of that. So sometimes if there's too much motion there and you're feeling overwhelmed with it, I'll kind of clear my palette, I'll kind of go, whoop, oh, right? And then kind of put that little sketch down, that moment down. That also works for birds in flight. But as they go around, you'll see them get into the same posture again and again and again. Those postures that they hit the most often, those will be the most characteristic postures. And those are the drawings that you get the furthest along on. You don't need to finish any of these. You don't need to have fine, high-resolution field guide detail. Those field guide drawings are done, again, with all the dead birds all over the easel and all the sketches there together and photographs. They're putting all that stuff together. And together, that's what allows you to kind of be effectively drawing and sketching out there. If you start to feel overwhelmed by sketching things, just start making written notes of what you see and describing what you see. And that's going to make a big difference in your ability to sit out there in a marsh and really be able to successfully draw and sketch what you see. There's no right way to do it. There's a lot of different approaches that you can take. Have fun, play with it, take approaches that really work for you. Some people are very scientific in their approach. Other people are very expressive and creative and artistic. Other people have a sort of blending of the two. Some people have lots